ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Nearly 2 years ago, Erin Patterson served beef Wellington to her family at that now infamous mushroom lunch, and her murder trial has finally begun. I'm Stephen Stockwell. Each day, we're racing straight from court to our Mushroom Case Daily studio to bring you all the evidence from the trial. We'll have a new podcast every evening that court is sitting. To make sure you don't miss new episodes, hit the follow button on the Mushroom Case Daily podcast. You can find it on the ABC Listen app.
This week, Donald Trump paused his massive tariff on Chinese goods entering the US for 90 days, and he reduced it from 145 to 30%. China reciprocated. So, is the US president's economic dream of bringing manufacturing back to America dead? Today, we chat with a US designer caught up in the tariff chaos about what it's been like, and to an economist to make sense of it all. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily.
I'm Cassie Abel. I'm the founder and CEO of Wild Rye. We're a women's outdoor apparel brand, and we're based in the state of Idaho.
Yeah, and you've had a pretty rough time, I would say, in the last little while because of Donald Trump's tariffs.
Yeah, to say the least. It's been the last month and a half has felt like 17 years.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike.
Donald Trump has promised his scattergun tariffs will see markets boom. But instead, Wall Street was flooded with red ink.
Another tumultuous day on the New York Stock Exchange.
Is it okay in the short term to have a recession?
Yeah, everything's okay. What we are, I said, this is a transition period. I think we're going to do fantastically.
Following weeks of turmoil on world financial markets, Donald Trump has agreed to lower the temperature in the trade hostilities between the US and China.
We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So before we move on to how you're actually faring, just tell me a little bit more about your business. When did you begin it and what was it all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wild Rye is a women's-specific technical apparel brand. We launched in 2016. I personally have worked in the outdoor industry for a really long time and just saw that most women's apparel was basically just men's apparel adapted for a woman and not adapted very well. So ended up launching Wild Rye to bring women a better option. And all of our working capital is a loan that's secured by my house. We started in 2016. We actually attempted production in the U.S. And our product came back so flawed, so delayed that it almost sank our business before we even came to market.
Wow.
So I have scarring experiences.
So you design your clothing in the United States, and originally you did try to manufacture it in the United States.
Yeah, the quality was low. The cost was really high. The communication with the manufacturers was really challenging. You know, in addition, most of our fabrics are highly technical, so we're importing them from overseas anyways. So the expense to ship high-quality fabrics from overseas started to mount. Those were the primary ones, and it just didn't feel like it was a way to scale a business.
So in your mind, there was no way that you could have been a profitable business if you had continued to make the clothing in America, so you shifted to China.
Yeah, exactly. So after our first season, my now former business partner and I talked to many other outdoor industry professionals, and we ended up landing with some really amazing factory partners in China, and we've been with them pretty much ever since. And so we've built incredible relationships with the factory owners. They've come to our small office here in Idaho to meet, and we've gone over there. And Yeah, I mean, these are really amazing human beings who are running these factories. This isn't like a distant enemy.
Yeah.
These are real people with really high quality values and standards. So, yeah, I mean, we've been in China ever since. They believed in us. They took bets on us when we were teeny tiny, and we've grown together.
And your business, what was really in a pretty good position right before Donald Trump introduced his tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, our sales are booming. We haven't raised any prices yet, so we haven't necessarily seen a massive decline in our consumer demand, but our cost was unmanageable in the first month and a half since the reciprocal tariffs were put into place. So, yeah, I mean, we've spent the last month and a half scrambling. I spent a week in D.C. with the Outdoor Industry Association lobbying for exemptions and tariff reductions. Yeah, I mean, it was hard to see a path through the 145% tariff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess when he slapped that 145% tariff on China, you would have been really looking closely at your books. So what were the figures actually showing you? How much was this going to cost your business?
Well, perfect example, we have a purchase order that we placed back in December for roughly $700,000. We budgeted $200,000 for the tariffs because apparel already pays a really disproportionately high amount in tariffs. And we were looking at those tariffs increasing from $200,000 to $1.2 million. So more than the actual cost of the product.
Wow. So you could no longer make a profit on that product?
Not even close. Yeah.
Wow.
With all the uncertainty out there, it's been really hard to imagine making commitments because every other country that is known for technical apparel originally had roughly 50% tariffs put in place on April 2nd. So without knowing what's going to happen at the end of the 90-day pause, it's really hard to make adjustments. There's a lot of considerations, a lot of things to weigh. You know, it's like putting together a 5,000-piece puzzle with half the pieces missing. But the U.S. is not an option. We'd move to South America or Europe or elsewhere in Asia long before we'd move back to the U.S. for technical apparel.
And Cassie, at this point, what are you doing with the goods that have already been made in China? Are you leaving them there?
Well, the news on Monday is that the tariffs have been reduced for 90 days. So we're looking at 30% tariffs for the next 90-day window. So we had actually paused production on a lot of products. So now we're
going fast. Yes.
Going the other direction and scrambling to get products made because they'll have to be on a boat within the next month in order for me to feel confident that they'd get through Customs and Border Patrol prior to the tariffs increasing because the shipping rates are going up. The capacity, on cargo ships is going down because every brand is rushing to move product right now. And so basically woke up on Monday morning to a whole new set of problems.
Oh my gosh, yes, doing business in America right now, it just sounds incredibly stressful. I mean, do you think there are a lot of business owners that will just say, this is now too hard?
I mean, I had that thought. Half jokingly, I love my brand. We have such an incredible team. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But I was talking to my husband and I was like, even if I decided I wanted to wind this down, if I decided this was too hard, I couldn't because our house is on the line for this. I'm sure there will be some attrition of brands in the next 6 months, but everyone has a unique set of problems and things that they're up against.
I'm Justin Wolfers. I'm a professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan.
Justin, what a whirlwind time for business in America and China. An understatement.
It's the only time in the world where people are excited to talk to economists.
That's very true as well, and a pretty confusing time for everyone else. Anyway, so Donald Trump, he slapped this 145% tariff on Chinese goods in early April. China, of course, responded with a 125% tariff, and that really did bring a lot of trade between the nations to a complete standstill, didn't it?
Absolutely. Sam, I'm going to be a stickler on language here because I think clear language leads to clear thinking. It's quite common to say that Trump put a tariff on Chinese goods, but it's only half right. Trump put a tax on Americans who imported Chinese goods. The moment you understand that, then you start to see who tariffs help and who tariffs hurt, and it helps you understand both the economics and the politics of this. A tariff, in this case, is a tax on Americans, and they would then pass it on to American consumers.
Yeah, okay. So the tariff on China, of course, has now been reduced to 30%, and China has dropped its to 10%. So just tell me, who do you think blinked here? Was it Trump or China? Donald Trump says he did it because China was suffering a lot.
I think it's entirely wrong to say who won, the US or China. The reason for that, when we think about economics and when we think about trade, we often think about competition. But it turns out that my field of economics is far more beautiful than that. Economics fundamentally is about cooperation. Really, the question is, if I get together with someone from China, I've got a bunch of tasks I need to do, they've got some tasks they need to do. Could we just reallocate those tasks so they do the tasks they're really good at and I do the tasks I'm really good at? And so between us, we end up producing more together than we would apart. So to turn this into international trade, America's got a great deal of very skilled software engineers, people who are really good at writing iPhone operating systems, for instance, or inventing new iPhones and patenting new iPhones and so on. China has got an enormous amount of factory labour and actually some very precise factories as well. And so basically, if Americans do what they do best, spend a lot of time designing phones, and the Chinese do what they do best, actually make the phones, people in America get very well put together phones at very reasonable prices, and people in China get access to cutting edge technology, and we're both better off. So both Chinese and Americans were being hurt by America's tariffs. Both Chinese and Americans were being hurt by China's tariffs. So if both of them blink, or if even either of them blinked, it actually makes people in both countries better off, and that's something to celebrate.
Yeah, but Donald Trump, he said he was doing all of this because he wanted to make America great again. He wants Americans to make things for Americans. Has he given up on that dream, has he? Is that just not actually possible? He can't actually reinvent manufacturing in the United States?
It could happen, but is it a good idea? So right now, the United States is very close to full employment. So basically everyone who wants a job has one. So that means if we want a bigger manufacturing sector, that means people have to move away from other jobs. So is it a good idea to move people away from writing software code for the next iPhone and move them across to the production line to screw screws into iPhones instead? My answer to that is no. The president has a different answer, but it turns out when you talk to people in factories, most folks in factories don't want their kids to work in factories. They want their kids to adopt all of the miracles of a modern economy, which is that we can work in white collars and not go home with aching bodies and sore fingers. In the US at the very least, rich people seem to think that what poor people want is to work in factories. What's difficult here is discussing this in the context of Trump. The reality is Trump doesn't understand the very simple basics of economics. The reason I want to put it in such stark terms is Trump does see the world as a competition, that the only way for him to win is for someone else to lose. He has a very fixed pie sense of the world. He misses these opportunities to grow the pie because he's so intent on bullying to get the bigger slice.
Well, this is, of course, a 90-day deal, if you like, the reduction in the tariffs. Do you think that Donald Trump would really go there again, though, that he would actually increase the tariffs to levels above 100%, given what we've seen?
Look, any sentence that begins with, can you predict what President Trump will do next? If it's answered honestly, it has to be answered with no. No one can predict this at all. And just to give you a couple of highlights, could anyone have predicted that the first act of the Trump presidency would be to impose punitive tariffs on Canada, our nearest neighbour, closest ally, and who hates Canadians?
Exactly.
Or more recently, the president sort of woke up one day and suddenly tweeted that he wanted to put a 100% tariff on movies. It's clear he hadn't spoken to any of his staff. He hadn't thought it through. He hadn't realised that would undermine the competitiveness of the American movie industry. So the point that you get out of that is that the tariff button is just there inside his phone and he seems willing to push it. The half-life of a Trump trade policy is around about 2 weeks. So we learned what happened in China, but what we haven't learned is how long that policy will stick around for.
Justin Wolfers is a professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan. Cassie Abel owns Wild Rye, a woman's clothing label designed in the US and manufactured in China. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Sam Dunn. Audio production by Adair Shepherd. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. ABC News Daily will be back again on Monday. Thanks for listening.